Hi, everybody. Good day and welcome to today's episode of the Analytics podcast. Today, we'll be talking about something really, really interesting, that affects every single professional, right? So, it's a topic that you sometime have thought about, and the topic basically is should I stay or should I go? How to deal with feeling left behind. With me today is an amazing professional, called Evans Uhunoma. And Evans is somebody that has worked with PwC and is currently working with one of the amazing big consulting firms, right? So Evans has been able to transition from being a traditional HR, into management consulting, right? So, hello, Evans. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you for joining us on today's episode of, Analytics podcast, right? So I consider today's topic something that is really, really important, because at one point in everybody's career, a working class individual, you must have thought, okay, at what point do I actually transition into another role? At what point do I get another job? At what point do I move, right? Am I making the right decisions and all of that? So that is why I actually consider today's topic very important, because if you actually get that step of staying or moving, if you get it wrong, it impacts your life for quite a while. So we're gonna get into the session today, but before we do that, I'd just like you to do a bit of background experience about yourself. Just tell us a bit about yourself before we get started.
Okay, cool. Hi everyone. Evans here. I currently work as a business change consultant with one of the professional services firm here in the UK. Before now, I also worked in PwC in Nigeria, a financial institution in Nigeria, and also a startup, so which was quite interesting. I have a bachelor's in business administration, and I also have a master's in human resource management. So that's a bit about me. So I'm sure as we go ahead, you get to hear more.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Evans. So let's get right into the session for today. Now, as somebody that has transitioned from being a traditional HR into management consulting, what was the turning point for your transitioning, right? Because you literally left being a traditional HR into what you do currently, right? So what led to that move, basically?
Yeah, a host of things. I think, as the popular saying goes, the only thing that is constant to life is change, right? So we do things, you try it out, and 2, 3 years into it, you probably discover, I think I want to try something else, and for a host of reasons, right? So for me specifically, it was impact. I felt what I was doing was not reaching as much people as I probably would love to, in terms of value. That's not to say the work I was doing wasn't adding value to people. I think to a very large extent it was to people in my team and some other colleagues in immediate organization, but I basically wanted more. I think that was the first reason. The second reason was that I became bored. Doing HR actually came quite easy to me. So relatively, I would say I excelled quite quickly, quite fast, as the various milestones that I actually achieved could tell to. But I just became bored. I didn't want to sit doing the same thing for 6 months, 1 year, and whatnot. In consulting, it's a completely different type of life. You could get to be assigned to a project that you do for 3 months, you do another for 6 months, you do another for 1 year, and these are various clients, some of the biggest brands in the world. And so essentially, it's almost like you're working for a new company every 3 months or every 6 months. So that way, I don't get bored, and that way I would be able to like do some work that makes biggest impact in some of the biggest brands in the world. And at some point, I actually thought it was good for me to make that change. So yeah.
All right, absolutely. So, two things that you mentioned. First is you wanted more, right? You wanted to be more impactful, reach a lot more people, a lot more companies. And the second is you became bored. So, all of this, is what is responsible for the change in your career or responsible for your transitioning. All right, thank you for sharing that. So, basically, was there ever a moment where you felt like the professional world was moving faster, than you? Right? And how did you catch up, or basically, how did you get ahead?
Yeah, there was. I think for me at that point was at my last stint working in Nigeria. I was in PwC. I wasn't in consulting then, so I was in backend. So I worked in the human capital team. So it was interesting moment for me, right? But my counterparts in consulting, audit, tax, their learning trajectory was actually quite different. It was faster pace, not to even talk about promotions and milestones and whatnot, because they are the client facing one. So their team brings, in quotes, the money to the business. And so they tend to either get paid more or promotion is actually quite faster. So for me, then, I actually had a lot of peers who were doing like either the audit, tax, and consulting, and it looked like they were going faster than I was, which was fine. Everyone's trajectory is different, but I wanted something different. So I thought they were going too fast than myself, and if I continue on my current career path, they probably become managers, senior managers, and I'm probably still like senior. An assistant manager if you're conversant to the grade levels in professional services. So for me, I think at that point I was quite keen to pivot into consulting and add lots of transferable skills, because apart from the fact that I was doing human resources, I knew that I had very good knowledge base of various domains. I could transition, so it just takes you making that action and whatnot. And so yeah, I eventually pivoted. I'm currently in consulting. I think in the last 3 years, I've changed milestone 3 times, so which is quite interesting, right? So I'm currently in my third milestone now, rather. So I've changed milestone twice, and so which is quite interesting because you don't get to do that if you work in back end or in some industry sort of like firm. So yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for, sharing that. Right. So earlier in your career, was there ever a point saying that you worked at the back end and all of that, you had teammates or colleagues that were moving, they were in consulting and all of that. How was the external pressure for you? Right? Did you have that self-doubt or external pressure that led you into, oh, I need to stay, or you need to just leave the role? Right? Was this something that was from within, or it was from the pressure, or these people are moving really fast and all of that, like you mentioned?
Yeah, it's both. So first, you just have to be honest with yourself that the pressure is always going to be there, right? Sometimes from others, but sometimes it's also a pressure that you've placed on yourself, which in most cases is actually good. So you don't become complacent, right? So you want to keep being motivated. I think a story that probably comes to my mind was even before I switched to PwC, when I was still working the financial institution in Nigeria. I really wanted to leave. I was looking for an exit opportunity. I thought if I moved to a bigger organization to continue HR as at then, I'll be able to do more value. Probably won't get bored, which eventually
Right.
was not the case. But then when I wanted to leave, like the MD of the organization, it was a medium-sized organization, about 300 people. The MD, the CFO, and whatnot, they really didn't want me to leave. They were quite keen for me to remain, offering me more pay and whatnot. And sometimes if you really do not know what you want, you sometimes get, "Oh, okay, I probably just stay. They like me. They are willing to offer me more money," and you eventually do not make that big move that you want to. And for some people, that's the reality. Also, there sometimes can be some internal pressure. While I was trying to pivot this my exit opportunity, I did an interview then in one of the biggest oil and gas companies in Nigeria, a multinational one there, which I was quite positive was going to go my way, being in the final top two after going through a lot of stages, 100,000 people and whatnot in the application process. Eventually didn't work out. It was devastating, and sometimes you start questioning yourself, okay, I'm probably not as good as I thought. Um,
Yeah.
it's probably just good for me to stay here. Yeah, they like me a lot. I'm a village champion, in quote. Um, you're
They're
living the life.
offering better pay.
Exactly, and so yeah, it can come from both places. But going back to that, so eventually I left. I got a couple of offers, I think three there about then, and I chose PwC, which eventually then became the stepping stone for my current career trajectory. So the pressure is going to come. Sometimes you place them on yourself. Sometimes it could be imposter syndrome. You don't really think you're as good as the way you thought. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's not. It's just the general feeling of, oh, you don't think you're doing enough and all, but you just have to be able to shrug it off. And so I think that was what I did.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. Now, you see the decision to stay or to move, right? Is really a hard one. I consider it as a hard one because for some people, they sort of wait for the sign. They're just looking out for the sign, right? Is it time for me to leave? If I leave now, where do I go to and all of that? Even if they know that, oh, this place is no longer working for me or I'm no longer growing here. So, what would you say, talking about, recognizing the fact that you need to move and all of that? What are the subtle signs that you would say one should look out for or try to spot, that indicates that a company or whatever organization you're currently working for, is no longer a growth space?
Yeah, some of the signs are quite subtle. Some are actually quite glaring. You have to be um, metaphorically blind for you not to see them. So I guess some of those signs are people around you that you work with. So let's take for example, you get into an organization, you see someone who's been there for like 12 years. In that 12 years, they probably change position maybe once or twice. That's a
Right.
sign. That's likely going to be in 12 years time. Could be different, it could be the exception, but that's the reality. If someone has spent 12 years, lots of people, not just picking one out of like 20 people and whatnot, if that's the typical reality there, a lot of people spend lots of time in their role and the job growth doesn't change, and also you also probably look at the pay. Let's take an abstract amount. Let's look at the going rate in Nigeria currently is, let's say, 200k per month, and you see someone who is probably say, oh, I've been working in this organization for the past 8 years, I'm currently earning 220k, and you probably are just starting with 150k. In 8 years time, that's what you're going to look like. So the signs are all around you, people who has been there before you. So if you were to join an organization and it looks like lots of people that are there are relatively stagnated, the pay is not good, the career growth is not there, that's your sign. It basically just means that at some point you just have to start thinking of, okay, that's likely going to be me. So why I really want to get good experience here, I also want to start thinking about my exit opportunities. And yeah, those are some of the most obvious signs here.
Yeah, just to deviate a little bit. For some people, at the point where they get into an organization and then they figure, oh, it's time to leave, they get emotionally attached, right? And they try to feel like, oh, I'm the special one. I'm definitely not going to stay here, like you said, for 12 years or for a couple of years. It's going to be tricky. So I was saying that for some people, they get emotionally attached, even when the signs and all of that are there. So, what would you say to just something? What would you say like to get them off that emotional, feeling and all of that? Would you rather advise, oh, you need to look out for yourself always, or consider the company and all of that? What would it be for you if you were in that scenario or situation where you're emotionally attached?
Yeah, it depends. Sentimental feelings has its place, right? So you want to be doing something that relatively you think you're fulfilled in, that it gives you a bit of like, not necessarily a butterfly feeling, but it gives you a bit of that fulfillment that you can say, okay, I think what I'm doing is fine. And typically you get that for people who work in the health sectors, medical practitioners and whatnot. Most of them, unfortunately, the salary sucks, and but they remain there because of like their passion for people's health and whatnot. So sometimes in the commercial space, sometimes that might be the case. You just enjoy what you do and relatively think, okay, it's fine. If that's you, it's all right. But you basically need to know that all of those are not going to pay the bills, and you
Mhm.
just have to try and see if you can strike reality in terms of, is it possible for me to get something that I have the sentimental attachment to, but also it relatively pays me well.
Right.
I probably can go back to a story when I graduated from the University of Benin in 2017. Quite some
Okay.
time, like 8 years ago, there about myself and my colleague, we started getting like a couple of offers for internships and whatnot. Went for NYC. Um, my cohorts at the university, then we had like a very good cycle group of friends. We're actually helping each other for one opportunity or the other. So a lot of us graduated with first class. So there was this one of our friend who started teaching, and why a lot of us were getting our internship either in a startup or in like a corporate organization and whatnot. I think 1 year, 2 years down into that, I remember having a conversation with him and I asked him, what's up? We're just catching up, and he told me he just got an opportunity, a graduate program in one of these banks, but it was quite attached to like the teaching that he was doing. The principal was like, oh, what you're doing matters a lot to like these kids and whatnot. You can't afford to leave. And for me, they just didn't make sense, because you can't give what you did not have. At some point, you're going to get there, you're going to get frustrated. The country doesn't encourage teachers, it doesn't encourage medical practitioners. Still, some people have to do it, but I didn't think that was him, because this guy was actually quite smart. As you can see, he graduated first class, but I could also tell how smart he was. And while many of us had started our internship or our first role, he was still teaching, and why he had gotten his first opportunity, he was sentimentally attached and thinking, oh, should I leave or should I go? And we've not spoken since then, but I think I remember the advice that I gave him: you just have to look after yourself, go for it. It's a no-brainer. It's a
Right.
no-brainer. If you really think you're called to be a teacher, then fine. If that's not the case, please follow the money.
Right, absolutely. I think I share the same opinion with you. Now, for people that are looking to transition or to maybe decide whether they should move or stay, sometimes at that point they may feel like, oh, this is just a temporary discomfort that I'm feeling, right? I could endure this challenging phase and all of that. So, how can you tell the difference between that, a temporary discomfort or a challenging phase that is worth enduring, and an environment that's just stifling your growth?
For many people, it all boils down to your manager. I think many people basically agree is that your experience that you get in your job basically comes from your direct reports. Some people call your manager, your direct supervisor, or whatnot. If your supervisor is actually one who looks like he's suppressing your growth, and the environment actually is really quite toxic. Generally, for me, I would think you need to look for exit opportunity, because you're likely not going to grow. Your exposure is actually not going to be high if you have like a really terrible manager like that. But if you were to be in a case where, okay, the manager relatively is okay, your immediate environment is relatively okay, but you're having like some personal issues at that particular point, it could be you just had got your heart broken on what's not, and that's
Right.
affecting your job. Everybody gets to have one emotional issue or the other at work. It could be you're bereaved and you're grieving at that particular point and all. You just have to give it some time and work it through. So, whichever way you best know how to work it through, it just doesn't always mean that you need to jump the ship if you have like personal challenges. But generally, for me, if your direct manager sucks, you either should be thinking of pivoting it to other teams within the same organization if you have the opportunity, or if the organization entirely. Sometimes I know this is not so easy, this is not so realistic. It just basically means that don't just sit down and do nothing. Keep chatting that course in terms of like the next part. For some people that could take 3 months, for some people it could take a year, but just do not accept your predicament and say, oh, my company currently sucks, but there's nothing I can do about it, and this is my life, and I'm just going to stay there. So that shouldn't be you.
All right. So basically, it's being able to tell if you're just going through a personal moment or it's something with the company, right? All right. Thank
Agreed.
you.
Yeah.
All right. So, at the point where you're considering or evaluating opportunities in fast moving sectors like tech,
Yeah.
what's your personal go to framework or your personal stay or go framework? Whether you want to decide if you should stay or go, what's that framework that you go to?
I grew up in a Christian family back then, so there's this parable from the Bible. Or was it a story? I can't remember anymore, but basically it goes like this. Let me paraphrase. I think Jesus and the disciples were going through a particular tree at one particular point, and I think it was a fig tree, and there was no fruit. And basically,
Yeah.
some of the disciples were like, "Oh, cut it off! It's not bearing fruit and whatnot." And just like, "Oh, you just chill, give it one more year. If we're coming back next season and it still doesn't bear fruit, then you can cut it." And so for me, I think I've adopted that as a personal framework. If 2 years into a particular job, a career path, and it doesn't look like it's bearing fruit, it's growing, there's no growth trajectory, your pay is not changing. Generally, you don't even see yourself different from when you joined, when you did the onboarding 2 years ago. You need to start thinking of your exit opportunity. But once it gets to year three, be thinking of jumping the ship really, really fast. So you need to grow and you get to know that. And for me, I've not personally experienced that because even within 1 year in every organization that I've been in, I've changed one milestone or the other, and within 1 to 2 years, which has been good for me. But that's the principle that I've held, that if I were to stay in a place maximum 3 years and I do not change a milestone, there's no promotion, no pay rise, I really will be thinking of leaving. and that's the advice I basically give to other people. So yeah.
Thank
I
you.
was talking about the story of the fig tree. 2 years afterwards,
Yeah.
it doesn't grow, and 3 years, just like, oh, give it one more year, a chance, and see if it bears fruit. So personally, I've adopted that as a framework for myself. If I stay in an organization 2 years into it, and I start seeing that no growth, no change in milestone, no promotion, no change in pay, I would start thinking of an exit opportunity, but I will give it a chance until year 3. And if after year 3 that doesn't change, I really want to jump ship. And I think why that has not happened to me personally, because relatively, I think I've been quite lucky. 1 to 2 years, I get a change in milestone or a pay or whatnot. But that's been the advice that I've been giving to others. And I think relatively, there's some truth in that.
All right, thank you for actually sharing that. Now, in my line of work, I get to answer a lot of questions around, with the advent of AI, is AI going to take my job really? Is this the point where I need to transition and all of that? Now, in your experience, right, what's the biggest misconception that professionals usually have about keeping pace with AI, automation, and digital transformation?
Yep, you're right. AI is going to take your job. that, that, that it's got a misconception, but there's also some truth in it. So yeah, two-edged sword. So yeah, I think to a very large extent it's true that AI is going to take a lot of jobs, but it's also going to create lots of them, and so you just have to think of
Absolutely.
you just have to think of how best can you leverage it, collaborate with it. You can make ChatGPT your friend. It currently has like a lot of agents and whatnot that you can basically use to like work simultaneously. So I'll probably put a question to you. What you're currently doing now as a host, who is asking me questions and smiling, do you think AI can do that?
At this point, no. Maybe to get to that point where it can actually do that. But for now, I just think, like you said, I just have to be able to incorporate AI into my process and what I do.
Exactly. So two,
Yeah.
3 years ago, I'm not sure AI could do what you're doing, but I think like it actually can. Video generations, they can actually smile. They get given like the content and you can turn that into words and whatnot. However, there are some things that you do that AI cannot do, right? So you sometimes ask me follow-up questions based on what I've asked. Why AI might be able to do that, there are some nuances, perception. If you probably perceive that I'm probably coughing, I want to take a break, you can tell me, oh, take this break, oh, let's continue, whatnot. And why AI can generate a job basically just means that there are some things that you as human will be able to do slightly better, and you want to
Right.
then tell yourself, I best I collaborate with AI. So it then means that you could use AI to even generate the questions that you're going to ask me in this session.
Mhm.
So that will free up yourself from almost like recurrent tasks, so that you can focus on more things like strategy, and you can use AI to do those beats and whatnot. So you can use AI to generate the questions, and you as the host, as the panelist, you then get to like be the one to use your own skill sets, bring your own smile, and make the conversation go smoothly and whatnot. But yeah, generally, I think people just have to find a way to work alongside AI. I think many organizations are investing billions of dollars globally. Most Fortune 500 companies, they're investing lots of that to even create their what's it called, their generative AI tools in house. And so employees don't even get to use like the ones in public domain and whatnot. So which basically means that they know that their employees need it. And sometimes it also helps because what one person can do sometimes in 2 hours, or what two people can actually do, one person cannot do that, because with AI you are able to then do like create drafts, do like
Right.
first run through version 1, and then iterate them based on your own experience, your own knowledge and whatnot. We just have to find a way to collaborate it with. But yeah, I think it's going to create other jobs, and just have to look out for that opportunity.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank you for
basically,
yeah,
yeah,
thank you for sharing.
basically, AI gets to take your job, but it also creates others. Just find a way to collaborate, and you'll be fine relatively. Just upskill, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, for some people, maybe I could just use the tech space as an example, right? For some people that are currently in certain career paths in tech, let's just use the data analytics, for example, right? Sometimes, I speak to people and they feel like, oh, my friends are delving into cybersecurity or into other aspects of tech and they're doing so well and all of that. So, my question to you would be, what is one way to stay relevant, for every single professional? What is one way to stay relevant without falling into the trap of chasing every new trend, or this is what is currently trending and I need to get into that and all of that?
I think the answer to that is a simple one: self-awareness. It's actually quite important. So you really need to be self-aware. You need to know the things that you can actually do and the things that you might actually struggle to do. So let's take the example you just gave, data analytics. So if data analytics is trending as a new sort of like career path and lots of people are doing that and you want to, you need to be someone who has like very keen eye for insights, patterns, trends, as to love quantitative data sets and whatnot. So you can't say, oh, I hate mathematics and you want to do data analytics and whatnot. So obviously AI is still going to be able to do a lot of this, but it all comes to you being able to identify patterns, identify trends, and more importantly, turn that into a story. Because all of the data analytics dashboards that you're going to create are actually useless if you cannot tell that story to a stakeholder is relevant to. They need that to make a decision. So you need to tell them this is what the data is saying and have domain knowledge of that particular stakeholder, and then say, okay, this is what the data is saying to this particular domain, and this is the decision that I think it's suggesting, which is then left for them to say. So you basically need a host of skill sets. So you need to be good with numbers, generally have keen eye for insight, also be a good communicator and storyteller to be able to translate that. Otherwise you just be sitting on the desk creating dashboards that nobody uses and whatnot. So I think that translates to a lot of other areas, cybersecurity, IT assurance and whatnot. If you think you're naturally curious to do that, go for it. Sometimes you try something, it doesn't work out, you pivot back, but sometimes it's just a waste of time. Really ask yourself, what do you think that you're naturally good at? And you actually have transferable skills from all the things that you've been doing in the past that you can take to that new job. My background was in HR, but currently today in my role as a business change consultant, I support a lot of technology transformation. And sometimes this is for a procurement client, procurement domain. Currently, I'm doing that for a supply chain and engineering. You could be doing that for finance transformation. Lots of areas that you basically have to be able to have the internal knowledge or the intrinsic knowledge, first of all, to be able to transfer it to that, and also like your general skill sets, general intelligence also. So I think a host of things, but don't just jump ship for jumping ship's sake, for trend's sake. You need to ask yourself if this is what you would eventually do 2-3 years time. So yeah.
So when it comes to balancing purpose and practicality, for somebody that thinks, oh, this job that I'm currently doing, even though it aligns with my long-term purpose, it aligns with my personal values, but I have to be practical. The pay, isn't worth it. There's no stability and all of that. So for you, how would you weigh practical concerns like this, pay, stability, against long-term purpose and, personal values?
I think this all depends on individual philosophy at the end of the day. Some people are quite keen to want to do things where they have fulfillment, where they think it's more aligned to their personal purpose. If that's you, that's all right. For some others, they are just a bit more realistic and tell themselves, using Nigeria as a case study, how the country currently is and what should you prioritize now. Because sometimes the truth is that you chase your purpose and personal value. Sometimes it doesn't come with the corresponding pay, and 3-4 years down the line, you pivot. And I think it should be the other way around. At the beginning, depending on what stage that you're in your career, but I think at the early stage, chase the pay, chase the stability. Especially if you're an immigrant somewhere else, you also need to think about that. So chase the pay, chase the stability. At some point, then you get a particular stage and you'll be able to pivot and even do something simultaneously with your job that you think most aligns with your passion, your purpose, and whatnot. And that's why you see lots of people in their late 30s, early 40s. You can see them being able to like run through things simultaneously. They have like a full-time job. They also have something that they are doing in the community, volunteering, or doing just sort of like a side gig and whatnot. That's because they spent the earlier time trying to like get that stability and the money, start a family and whatnot. And when you start getting to that point where you think, okay, the money that I'm getting should be able to fund this other aspect. Let's say, for example, you want to write a book that probably needs money without a publisher and whatnot. So get some of your money first, get stability at some point. You can actually sponsor all of those, as opposed to saying you want to write a book now and then be going to Australia and be begging people to buy your book, all in the name of pushing and personal value. So a balance matters. Sentiment, I'm up for it. Fulfillment, I'm up for it. I want you to be attached to what you're doing. But the reality is, if that doesn't fund your current lifestyle, it's not your source of living at that particular moment in time, you might likely see yourself actually switching again. And it then just like you didn't know what you were doing at the first instance.
Right, right. Thank you for sharing that explicitly. So, if you had somebody feeling left behind, right, in their current role and all of that, just the same way you felt, it's the world is moving really fast. The promotions are not forthcoming and all of that. So, if you have somebody in that position today, what's the very first mindset you think, or the mindset shift you think they should make? Very first thing they should do.
Yep. You can take an action. You are not in a state of a stalemate. Let's use a chess concept. So you are not in a position where you no longer have a step or an action to make. There is an action to make. And so it's not one for you to sit down and start sucking and say, oh, it's really crazy that I just have to accept my current condition and become complacent. I'm very sure if you think deeper, you analyze your background, look at your network, people around you, there is an action that you might be able to take. Sometimes it might be one that within the next couple of months, it leads to you being able to pivot into something else. In some other cases, it might take more time, 1 year, 2 years, and whatnot. But I'm always very sure that there's an action for you to take. So that is the first change of mindset. Do not think that you no longer have a step to make. There is an action somewhere to take, and the moment you have that, you are no longer in that state of complacency, and so your body basically tries to follow what your mind is telling you, right? So your mind is saying, okay, there's an action to take, I just have to think of what that action needs to be, what that next step needs to be. And I think that's the mindset that those people need to make.
Yeah. So, from what you've just said, there's a danger with feeling, oh, there's nothing I can do. I can only stay here and all of that. So the mindset should to be always think, what's the next thing I can do, right? What steps, what actions can I take, right? Thank you for, sharing that. Now, I think we're almost drawing close to the end of the podcast, right, for today. And just share with us what's one thing you like every single professional listening in on this episode of today's podcast to remember, about staying competitive in the modern workspace.
I would say the Pareto principle. Let me see if I can break that down. So sometimes that's called the 20-80 principle. To paraphrase that, it basically means that 20% of your effort usually brings 80% of the results. I can give an example for that. If you're working in an organization and you have like lots of deliverables, a lot of tasks that are assigned to you, in most cases, just 20% of that actually gives you the biggest results. So likely your promotion that you're going to get is tied to one particular deliverable or is tied to one particular stakeholder. Your next job is probably tied to one particular person within your network, that 20%. So long story cut short is it's not really about working hard but working smart. I know we already know that as a cliche, but that's basically what that principle tells you. It's basically telling you that instead of trying to be a jack of all trades, instead of focusing on every single thing, still do them. They are part of your deliverables or they are part of things that you have to do, but you need to know the ones that needs to be measured on, those 20%. Right. So if you are thinking of a promotion, you need to know out of that 5 stakeholder, which is this one stakeholder that is the most influential. If you have 5 deliverables, you need to ask yourself, which is this one deliverable that is going to change everything? Because you could work on 4 deliverables and you do it so well. If that does not appeal to, let's say, your supervisor, and your supervisor is actually quite keen on you doing so well in the other one that you didn't do, you've just wasted your time on 80%. So it's all about trying to identify almost like that little thing which has that very big impact, so you don't end up spending lots of your time, all your time trying to like do everything, and eventually you have little or no results. Major on the major, minor on the minor.
Right, right. Major on the major and minor on the minor. Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. I hope that to everybody listening, you're if you're in that dire situation where you need to decide if you should stay or you should go. I hope you've been able to catch one or two from what Evans has shared with us today. So before we call it a close, I'd like to ask Evans this question. So, is there anything you would have told your younger self when you were facing your first major career transition? Like anything you felt like, oh, I could have done this differently, and looking back in retrospect?
Yes, I think so. Growing
That
up, yeah, yeah. I think so. I think growing up, I wanted to be an engineer, and eventually, I went to the commercial class and pivoted and started doing business administration and whatnot. But I think specifically during my uni days in business admin, we got to focus on four areas: operations, finance, marketing, human resources. I knew I was actually quite keen in exploring any of these four areas because relatively I think I was okay in them. I think I should have followed the money at that very
right,
early stage. Yeah, and for me, most of the time, the money was in finance, and sometimes not just your traditional finance and accounting, obviously, but like other areas like private equity and whatnot. I could have, but decided to go with human resource, then which then I eventually pivoted into management consulting, and my finance knowledge is still coming to be quite useful now. But yeah, I think I should have made the decision very early on. So which basically means instead of having 3 years experience in management consulting and overall 7 years experience, I could have had 7 years experience in management consulting currently, but which is all right. Just like I've said from the beginning, you try something, doesn't work out, you decide to pivot. That is life. And so, if you're ever in that position, you just need to ask yourself, is it better for you to keep remaining in this path that you are thinking, I don't think I want to keep going in this path, than for you to pivot? Because if you don't change that particular direction today, in 4 years' time, 5 years' time, you're likely still going to change it. As a matter of fact, even this particular trajectory that I'm on, there's every tendency that I'm also going to change it in 5 years' time. Overall, I knew what I want to do when I started having YT. I want to be a professor and whatnot. So I know at some point I'm going to go back to the classroom. That's more of my purpose and whatnot. But for now, I'm chasing the pay. I'm chasing the bag. And so it just depends on your reality part time. But at the very beginning, when you are quite early at your career, please go for every single opportunity that comes to you. If it means you taking a jump every 2 to 3 years at that beginning point, do it. At some point, that stability will come.
right. Thank you for sharing that. So about can you hear me clearly?
Loud and clear.
So about chasing the bag, I think for me, we share the same opinion when it comes to you being a professor when you're way older. That's actually how I see myself when I'm way older. So I graduated from the University of Benin, just like yourself. I started did mathematics education, and at this point, or when I graduated, I just had to tell myself that, guy, you literally have to chase the pay now. Okay, maybe when I'm 50, 60. So when I have my dad saying, when do you want to lecture and all of that? I'm like, when I'm 50, 60, that's my retirement plan. So absolutely. So just to wrap off, I feel like there's somebody that may be listening in and then they feel like I'm too old at this point to go. Right? They fully understand from everything you've shared and all of that. They fully understand that yeah, this I'm not doing anything here and all of that. I've been here on this role for too long. There's no growth and whatnot. So, what do you think about age? Is it really a barrier, especially for somebody that is say 50 or 40? What do you think about
Uh,
that?
Unfortunately, in Nigeria, I think it is. It's a reality. I think I remember then when applying for a lot of graduate jobs, I think lots of them have a restriction of 24, some 25, some 26. And I think for some of the consulting firms, they were actually quite great at like leading the pack in terms of removing that age restriction. I know that's one for PwC in Nigeria, which is really good. So, irrespective of your age, you can even start as a graduate hire. So, for lots of people in Nigeria, it's almost even difficult for you to start as a graduate hire, but it doesn't mean you cannot pivot if you're an experienced hire. It just probably means that it might be quite a bit difficult. Unlike in the West, it's completely different. It doesn't matter how old you are. Even if you are 40, you can still apply for a graduate program, and you can still get in if you are qualified. And if you show that among all your cohorts, you were the best among them, you'll still be picked. Nobody is going to discriminate on you because of your age. And also, I think depending on where you are, if you think you're slightly older, or it's a bit difficult, if you're in the West, sure, you can go for graduate program. It doesn't matter. Do something that you love. Even if you get to do it for another 5 years, at least you're going to enjoy that. If you're in Nigeria, it might be a bit difficult for you to do that as a graduate hire because of the opportunities that are limited. But I'm sure there are going to be opportunities for you to be able to do that as an experienced hire. And it might then mean that you have to look at going through like junior roles and whatnot. And well, it's what's making that change eventually, because you always keep having that regret of, oh, I always wanted to do this, I didn't get to do that, and you don't want to have that when you're getting old. So yeah, make that move.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing. It's been a very amazing conversation with you, Evans. So we're going to wrap off at this point, and I'd just like to say, just to recap on some of the things that you've mentioned. So to everybody listening, if at any point in time in your current role you feel like you're not growing, if you feel like the pay is not good, there's some sort of stagnancy and all of that, that is your sign that you need to consider moving. And in moving, you need to be able to decipher between a temporary discomfort and something that is actually your reality, or this isn't working, or I'm just going through a personal temporary, discomfort and all of that. And then one important thing, never feel like there's nothing I can do at this point, right? So the mindset shift, basically, always what's the next step I can take, what actions, I can take, basically. So thank you so much, Evans, for sharing with me. I enjoyed speaking with you and all of that. And I hope that everybody that would listen in on this podcast is able to get value, from what we've spoken about so far. So thank you for your time, Evans. Till we meet again, enjoy the rest of your day and all of that. Okay, thank you so much for
very much, Miss Leah. Have a good day.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, all right. So I hope you enjoyed today's session. To everybody listening, I hope you got value, for your listening time and all of that. So till we meet again, join us back for another episode of the Tech Analytics podcast. Thank you, and bye for now. Cheers.